Okay, today we're going to talk about best lube for Clicky Switch, linear switch, and tactile switch. Best lube for every mechanical switch. In this video, we will go over the best lube for each key switch. This includes linear, tactile, and clicky. Why use lube on switches? Lubes make keyboard switches function better. So if you want to improve your typing experience, like your regular lubing is something that you cannot ignore. Lube doesn't eliminate the sound, rather improves it. It makes it slightly quieter but also smoother. For lack of a better word, the sound that a squeaky keyboard switch makes can be a bit irritating. However, you have to take note that switches range from smooth and tactile to extra clicky. So the lube you use for each type will vary. The biggest factor is the thickness of the lube. Another benefit is the reduction of friction. Friction makes it difficult for switches to function well. When you use lube, you are able to make them smoother and improve their functionality. Tactile switches. Once in a while, you will need to lube your tactile switches. You have to pick the best lube for tactile switches for you to improve their performance. Normally, the best lube should be the one that doesn't take away the tactility of a tactile switch. For this reason, a thinner lube is the best so as to maintain its tactility. Another aspect that makes a good lube for a tactile switch is quietness. Usually, a tactile switch remains quiet when you are using your keyboard, so the best lube for it should be the one that helps maintain the level of quietness that it should have. Also, consider that the lube you use should also be able to reduce friction, but at the same time not take away the level of resistance that should be felt as you use it. Here are a few recommended lubes for our tactile switches. Tribosys 3203, which is a thin semi-fluid lube, and GHV4 thin lube, which is a combination of thin Kritox oil and Kritox grease. Linear switch. Linear switches are known for their smooth and quiet characteristics, so when you're looking for the best lube for them, you have to keep this in mind. If the switch becomes noisy and squeaky, then you might need a thicker lube to retain its quietness. The best lube is one that is able to minimize the sound to the desired level, as well as maintain the preferred smoothness. In other words, when you realize that your linear switch is becoming scratchy, you have to find a lube that can take away the rough feeling for it to function well. Here are lubes that you can use for linear switches. Tribosys 3204, a thicker lube than Tribosys 3203. Kritox GPL 205 G0, a thicker lube than Tribosys 3203 and 3204. Kritox GPL 206 G0, a thicker lube than Kritox GPL 205. Kritox GPL 107 oil, a LED application is recommended for quality results. GHV4 thick lube, a mixture of thick Kritox oil and Kritox grease. Clicky switch. The best lube for clicky switches should have several abilities. To begin with, it should be able to reduce friction to a larger extent whenever necessary. Clicky switches have a higher level of resistance compared to linear switches. This enables it to have the clicky sound that comes out when using it. It is for this reason that you should find a lube that is able to maintain the desired level of resistance. If the amount of friction is high, the keyboard switch will not function at its best. You can consider the following lubes to lubricate your clicky switches. Tribosys 3203, a thin semi-fluid lube, and GHV4 thin lube, a combination of thin Kritox oil and Kritox grease. Any switch. There are lubricants that works well with any keyboard switch. Their flexibility makes them handle the different characteristics of different switches. For example, a multi-purpose lube is able to take care of the tactility of a tactile switch, the clicky trait of a clicky switch, and as well as the quietness of a linear switch. In this case, as you look for a lube that is able to work with any switches, you have to find the one that is able to handle the following issues perfectly: friction, sound, and smoothness. All switches face issues of friction at some point of their use. Thus, the best multi-purpose lube is the one that has the ability to reduce friction on all keyboard switches to allow for effective performance. Again, if there is any undesirable sound from a switch, a good multi-purpose lube should be able to reduce it to the desired level. Here, the lube should be able to handle the quiet trait of a linear switch as well as the clicky trait of a clicky switch. In other words, a good multipurpose lube is able to improve performance without affecting the characteristic of a switch. You can use these lubes for quality results on any switch. GHV4 Thick Lube, a mixture of thick Critox oil and Critox grease. GHV4 Thin Lube, a combination of thin Critox oil and Critox grease. Side note, a point to note is that some of the lubes are appearing in multiple sections. This is because the layer of application is what matters. For example, a thick layer of GHV4 Thick Lube is recommended for a linear switch, while a thin layer of the same lube is recommended for a tactile switch. Lube alternatives. If you're not able to use the recommended lubes for your keyboard switches, there are a couple of good alternatives that you can opt for. Here are some of the alternatives that should do fine: white lithium grease, Arden Real butter grease, and Finish Line Extreme Fluoro. In conclusion, keyboard switches should be regularly maintained, especially if you use your keyboard for many hours per week. Over time, excessive use might affect their normal functionality. This is where lubes come in handy. They play a major role in ensuring that your keyboard switch works well by reducing friction, maintaining the required sound, and improving its smoothness. Of course, this depends on the type of switch you are using. It could be linear, clicky, or tactile switch. The most important thing is to make sure that you use the right lube so that you improve the functionality of your keyboard switch. Check out Keyboard Kings. For more guides and reviews, go to my website at keyboardkings.com. Thank you. Link to this article will be in the description box below.